Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Sage Skills Lab on YouTube. This is the place where we dissect the science of human performance and help you build skills to stay ahead in a world that's moving faster than ever. So today we're going to talk about pivoting from gut feel to science and how top companies build unbreakable teams. So let's talk about the paper star. What do I mean by the paper star? Well, we've all hired people like this. On paper, they're flawless. The right degree, the perfect technical background, and they absolutely crushed the interview. They sign the employment contract, we all celebrate the win, and then 90 days later, maybe it's 180, the friction starts. They're not hitting the deadlines, they're not understanding how things work in this organization, they're experiencing conflict with a key teammate, or they're just simply disengaged. By the end of the 6 months, or maybe even a year, then they're gone. And where are you and your team? Well, you're left with a hole in your team and the cost of a mishire. In fact, a junior level mistake costs up to 1.5 to 2 times that person's annual salary and lost productivity and recruitment fees. The cost of mishires at the senior manager level, they're like an iceberg. A failed senior hire acts as a force multiplier of inefficiency across the whole department. The general rule of thumb for a failed senior manager hire is 3 to 5 times their annual salary in total losses. Can you imagine that? 3 to 5 times. If any of this is landing close to home, stay with me because the fix is closer and simpler than you may think. If you're new to using personality profiles in your hiring, you're likely stuck in the experience trap. You're hiring based on what someone did at their last company, while ignoring the behavioral DNA that determines if they can do it here. In other words, you're hiring for skills and you're hiring for past experiences, but you're actually firing for behavior, or you're letting go. We're going to show you how to get a look behind the mask of what we all present when we're putting our best face forward. And if you're already using assessments, I have a challenge for you. Are you just a gatekeeper, or are you an architect? Most talent acquisition teams use psychometric reports like a pass-fail exam. If the score is green, then they hire. And then they stick that report into a digital filing cabinet, never to be seen again. And this is a massive waste of intelligence. If you're not using that data to tell the hiring manager how to coach that person on day one, you're leaving 90% of the ROI on the table. But how do you actually move from being a gatekeeper to an architect? Well, it starts by changing what you measure. To show you what this looks like when the stakes are at their highest, let's look at how one of the world's leading telecoms providers tackled this exact problem. If you've already seen our case study on the telecoms project, that's great. I'm going to share the behind-the-scenes version, the decisions that don't really make it into the PDF. And if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. You can find the link in the description below at the end of this video, and you'll have everything you need to understand exactly the way that most organizations use personality data is fundamentally broken, and what to do instead. Our telecoms client faced a massive challenge: 800 applicants for just 10 spots and a high-stakes big data development program. In an environment like this, technical skills are table stakes. They're the cost of getting into the game, not necessarily the cost of winning it. To find the true thrivers and not just the survivors, our client needed to go deeper. They needed to understand their candidates' behavioral composition. We helped them implement a dual-layered funnel that moved beyond the resume. First, they used our 5-step personality profile, which is based on the gold standard science of the 5-factor model. Now, the key here isn't just the score. It's how you compare a person's score to people like them. In other words, the norming. Because this was a global search, we used a global peer norming group, which includes nationality and gender, to ensure psychometric fairness and reliability. This meant our client wasn't accidentally hiring for cultural similarity. They were hiring for potential. Then they added a second piece of data, our pressure point profile. Our client's digital team was navigating a rapid transformation. They needed to know who had the internal center of control to stay resilient in the middle of uncertainty, or when a project pivoted, or when they had to present to a senior leadership team under fire. Now, you might think the story ends here. You pick the top 10 and move on, but team architecture doesn't stop at the hire. This is where team architecture gets really interesting, and it's where most organizations stop way too early. The most brilliant part of this case study was that the organization provided individual coaching sessions for finalists before they started. They used the assessment data to prepare the candidates for the culture they were about to enter. And they used the coaching sessions and our video debriefing to help develop those candidates who weren't selected. It makes sense, right? These are all great candidates. So why stop developing? They're a great pipeline. And they're humans. Why not support and nurture everyone in that talent pipeline? But most organizations don't. After all, you're hiring for the journey, not just the job, and it takes a lot of talent bench strength for a company's journey. This idea that you hire for the journey, not just the job, is something I was recently discussing in London with my co-author, Randall Peterson. In our research on teamship, we've found that the highest performing teams in 2026 aren't built by stacking A players. Randall and I have been doing research across organizations in multiple regions, and the pattern is consistent. The teams that outperform aren't the ones with the best individuals. They're the teams that were deliberately composed to meet the needs of the project, the organization, and the context. They're built through context engineering. Now think of it this way. Most talent acquisition practitioners ask, is this a good candidate? But the architect asks, what behavioral gap does this candidate fill in my existing team? Is it necessary here? Is the skill or behavior necessary for success elsewhere in our organization? In our telecoms case study, they didn't just want 10 individuals. They wanted a cohesive unit. Using scientific team composition analysis, using their personality profiles, they looked for complementary friction. Context engineering. If you have a team full of visionaries, high in openness, you don't hire the 11th. You hire a finisher, someone high in conscientiousness who can bring those visions across the line. You hire the puzzle pieces that are missing, not the mirrors of what you already have. But you have to find the right balance. Someone who is high on conscientiousness and someone also open to understanding and working with others different from themselves. In other words, high in openness and higher than most in agreeableness. And if you really want to geek out, you can also take a look at our journal article on the importance of agreeableness in uncertain times. You can find the link in the comments below and then download the article from our website at TalentSage.com. It's a powerful shift in mindset, but I know what you're thinking. How do I actually do this tomorrow with the tools that I have? Well, it comes down to changing the one thing you probably do every day, the application and the interview process. So how do you become a team architect? Well, you have to stop asking generic questions and start interviewing the report. Here's a 3-step framework you can use in your next hiring round. First, spot the growth gap. Look at your candidate's 5-step profile. Don't look for perfection. There isn't a perfect profile. Look for the lowest score or the highest score. You're looking for extremes. If they're low on agreeableness, that's not a no. It's a management cue. It's a coaching cue. Number 2, ask the data-driven question. Instead of, tell me about a conflict you once experienced, use the profile. Say, your data suggests you prioritize logic over social harmony. That's strength in data, but it can also lead to friction in teams. So tell me about a time you had to repair a relationship while keeping a project on track. That's where you get the nuggets of wisdom. Are they self-aware? Do they realize the friction they might cause? And do they have a micro strategy for how they might actually work through that? Number 3, create the onboarding blueprint. When you hand the file to the hiring manager, give them a user manual. Tell them this person is low in agreeableness and high in conscientiousness. In other words, they can be perceived by some people as a machine, one who views people as replaceable units of production rather than humans and colleagues to be developed. So you'll need to coach them that while their intention is good, the problem is that they deliver brutal truths that can cause direct reports to shut down for 3 days at a time. So when they deliver feedback without a buffer, they create 72 hours of downtime for that employee. And their goal is 100% uptime. For them to get the fastest correction and the behavioral change they're seeking, they have to wrap the data in neutral delivery so they don't trigger a defensive loop that stops their colleague from working. Ultimately, what you're doing is realizing that you're not just filling a vacancy. You're actually setting the manager up and you're setting the team up for success. And you're setting the new hire up for a 3-year success story rather than a 6 to 12-month failure. Now, here's the honest truth. Most talent acquisition teams don't have time to build this framework from scratch. And that's where we at TalentSage come in. We've done this across sectors, regions, and we can show you in a single conversation what this could look like for your team. We all know the goal of talent acquisition in 2026 isn't to fill seats. In fact, loads of organizations are actually reducing the number of seats. It's to engineer success and to actually build great talent pipelines. Our telecoms case study showed that when you use data-driven insights, you don't just reduce the risk of a mishire, you validate your culture and you accelerate your ROI from the very first day. If you're a leader or a talent acquisition professional and you're ready to move from hiring to team composition and team architecture, visit us at talentsage.com where you can download our full case study or research on the importance of agreeableness in uncertain times. The links are in the description. You'll find out more about how our evidence-based tools can help you build the unautomatable skills and teams of the future. And if you're watching this and thinking, hey, this is what we're missing, don't sit on that feeling. The link below doesn't go to a form. It goes straight to us. And if you want, we can set up a 20-minute call with our team. No pitch deck, no pressure, just a proper conversation about whether this approach can help you and your organization get to where you're headed. Thanks for joining us at the Sage Skills Lab. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. What's the biggest hidden trait you look for in a hire? I'll look forward to seeing you next week in our Sage Skills Lab.